The massive Klingon warship loomed in Earth's orbit, its hull gleaming under the sun's rays. Inside, female warriors paced restlessly, their bodies thrumming with an urgent biological imperative. Commander Xanth stood on the bridge, her fingers clenched around the communication console as she broadcast their plea for help. "People of Earth," her voice crackled through the transmission. "We come seeking assistance. Our species faces extinction without your aid." The ship's crew of 5,000 Klingon females writhed in discomfort, their breeding cycle in full swing. A deadly virus had decimated their male population, leaving them without compatible mates. Without successful breeding within 72 hours, hormonal shock would claim their lives. On Earth, governments scrambled to address the crisis. Emergency meetings convened as leaders debated the implications of an alien species on their doorstep, desperate for mates. The decision was made to send a team of experts to the Klingon vessel, led by renowned xenobiologist and former Special Forces operative Russell Davis. Russell stood in a secure briefing room, absorbing the classified information before him. Preliminary scans suggested human males might be biologically compatible with Klingon females. This explosive revelation was kept from the public and most of the team to prevent widespread panic. As Russell assembled his diverse group of experts, geneticists, endocrinologists, and cultural liaisons, he grappled with the weight of their mission. Failure could mean either the extinction of an entire alien race or a desperate invasion of Earth by warriors seeking to forcibly acquire mates. The human delegation boarded a shuttle, tension palpable as they approached the Klingon warship. Russell's mind raced, strategizing how to navigate the complex diplomatic waters ahead while protecting his team and Earth's interests. As the airlock hissed open, they were greeted by the sight of visibly agitated Klingon warriors. The aliens' muscular bodies trembled with barely contained energy, their eyes wild with a mixture of hope and desperation. Commander Xanth stepped forward, her voice strained as she addressed the humans. "Welcome aboard," she said, her words clipped. "We have little time. Without successful mating within 72 hours, my entire crew will perish. We require any solution you can offer, even if it means using Earthmen as breeding stock." Russell nodded grimly, leading his team to the hastily prepared lab. As they set up their equipment and began analyzing Klingon physiology, the gravity of their task settled over them. Initial tests confirmed human-Klingon compatibility, but also revealed potential dangers that would need to be addressed. As the clock ticked down, Russell and his team worked tirelessly to develop a safe method for interspecies breeding. The fate of the Klingon race, and potentially Earth itself, hung in the balance. With each passing hour, the female warriors grew more agitated, their control waning as biology threatened to override reason. Russell knew they were sitting on a powder keg. If they failed to find a solution, the consequences could be catastrophic. The thing between his legs, the very organ that might save an alien race, suddenly felt like both a blessing and a curse. As he looked at the desperate faces of the Klingon females surrounding them, he realized that the next 72 hours would determine the future of two species. Russell's eyes darted between the data displays and the agitated Klingon females pacing outside the lab. The air thrummed with tension as Commander Xanth's fingers dug into her palms, her chest heaving with labored breaths. Time was running out. "Dr. Foster, status report," Russell called out, his voice steady despite the pressure. Emily Foster looked up from her microscope, her brow furrowed. "The hormonal imbalances are accelerating. We're looking at widespread organ failure within the next 48 hours if we don't intervene." As if on cue, a crash echoed through the ship. Two Klingon warriors had come to blows, their bodies slamming against the bulkhead. Xanth barked an order, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. Russell made a split-second decision. "Team, remove your protective gear. Now." "Sir?" Dr. Chen, the endocrinologist, looked at him in disbelief. "Trust me, do it." With a series of hisses and clicks, the human team shed their environmental suits. Almost immediately, a change rippled through the Klingon crew. The fighting Klingons separated, their aggressive stances softening. Xanth's eyes widened, nostrils flaring as she inhaled deeply. What is this?" she asked, her voice husky. Dr. Foster's eyes lit up with understanding. "The pheromones. Our natural scent is having a calming effect. Russell nodded, relief washing over him as the Klingons visibly relaxed. But that relief was short-lived as he noticed Xanth's gaze locked onto him, her eyes dark with unmistakable desire. "Commander," Russell said, keeping his voice level, "we need to conduct physical examinations on volunteer Klingons. It's crucial for our research." Xanth nodded, her movements fluid as she approached him. "I volunteer," she purred. Over the next hours, the lab bustled with activity. Dr. Foster and her team collected vital data, their fingers flying over instruments as they analyzed Klingon physiology. Russell coordinated the efforts, hyper-aware of Xanth's proximity as she observed their work. A commotion outside the lab drew Russell's attention. Two of his team members, Dr. Ramirez and technician Cooper, were engaged in heated conversation with a group of Klingon females. "Hey now, easy there," Cooper said, his voice strained as a Klingon warrior traced a finger along his jawline. Russell strode over, his presence momentarily distracting the Klingons. "Remember the mission," he said firmly to his team. "No intimate contact. The risks are too great." As he turned back to the lab, Russell caught Xanth's eye. The Klingon commander looked away quickly, but not before he saw a flash of something in her expression. Jealousy? Frustration? He filed the observation away, focusing on the task at hand. Hours blurred together as the team worked tirelessly. With just 18 hours left on the clock, Dr. Foster approached Russell, her face a mix of excitement and apprehension. "We've done it," she said, holding up a vial of golden liquid. "A synthetic compound that mimics human male pheromones. In theory, it should stabilize their condition without actual mating." Russell eyed the vial. "In theory, we need to test it." Foster nodded gravely. "On a live subject, the risks are significant. Biochemical alterations, potential neurological effects." "I'll do it," Russell interrupted. "Sir, I must object," Dr. Chen started, but Russell held up a hand. "There's no time for debate. Prep the procedure." Minutes later, Russell lay on an examination table. His face hardened as Dr. Foster administered a series of injections. Pain lanced through his body, every nerve ending on fire. His vision swam, reality fracturing into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. In his hallucinatory state, Russell saw the Klingon homeworld, vast and beautiful. He felt the weight of centuries of warrior culture, the pride and honor that defined their species. And underlying it all, a deep, primal need for continuation. He came to with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat. Dr. Foster hovered over him, concern etched on her face. "How do you feel?" Before Russell could answer, alarms blared throughout the ship. Xanth burst into the lab, her face a mask of fury and fear. "Kalara has led a group of warriors to storm your crew's quarters," she snarled. "They intend to take mates by force." Russell struggled to his feet, his legs unsteady. "We need to stop them. Non-lethal methods only. We can't risk harming them." As they raced through the corridors, the sounds of struggle grew louder. They rounded a corner to see Kalara and a dozen Klingon females attempting to break down the door to the human quarters. "Kalara, stand down!" Xanth roared, but her second-in-command paid no heed. Russell stepped forward, his heart pounding. The experimental treatment surged through his veins, his skin practically humming with energy. As he approached, the Klingon females turned, their eyes locking on to him. Kalara's aggressive stance faltered. She inhaled deeply, her eyes widening. What is this scent?" Russell held out his hands in a placating gesture. "We have a solution," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "One that doesn't require force or violence." The Klingon warriors looked at each other, confusion and desire warring on their faces. Kalara took a step toward Russell, her movements almost hypnotic. Xanth growled, positioning herself between Russell and Kalara. "He speaks the truth. Stand down, all of you." For a moment, the corridor was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the Klingon females. Russell held his breath, acutely aware that the next few seconds could determine the fate of two species. Kalara's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. "Very well," she said, her voice rough. "Show us this solution." As Russell led the group back to the lab, he caught Xanth's eye. The Klingon commander nodded slightly, a mix of relief and something else. respect, perhaps, in her gaze. The immediate crisis averted, Russell knew the real challenge lay ahead. They had mere hours to replicate the treatment for 5,000 Klingon females. And even if they succeeded, the long-term implications of this first contact loomed large. As they entered the lab, Dr. Foster approached with a tray of hyposprays. "Are you ready to make history?" she asked. Russell nodded, rolling up his sleeve. "Let's save a species." Russell's eyes swept across the lab, taking in the determined faces of his team. The gravity of their situation hung heavy in the air, but a glimmer of hope sparked in his chest. The experimental treatment coursed through his veins, his skin tingling with an otherworldly energy. "It's time," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos that threatened to engulf them. "Open the lab doors." Dr. Foster's eyes widened. "Sir, are you sure? The Klingons are—" "Trust me," Russell interrupted, rolling up his sleeves. "This is our best chance." With a hiss, the lab doors slid open. The corridor beyond teemed with agitated Klingon females, their muscular bodies taut with hardly restrained energy. At the forefront stood Lieutenant Kalara, her eyes wild with a mixture of desperation and fury. As Russell stepped forward, a change rippled through the crowd. The Klingons' aggressive stances faltered, replaced by looks of confusion and something else. Kalara's nostrils flared as she inhaled deeply, her eyes locking onto Russell with an intensity that made his heart race. "What? What is this scent?" Kalara growled, her voice husky. Russell held out his hand, palm up. "We have a solution," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "One that doesn't require force." Kalara hesitated, her gaze fixed on Russell's outstretched hand. The corridor fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the Klingon warriors. With deliberate slowness, Russell stepped closer to Kalara. He gently took her hand in his, demonstrating a human handshake. The Klingon lieutenant's eyes widened at the unexpected gesture. "This is how humans greet each other," Russell explained, his voice soft but clear. "It's a sign of peace and respect." Kalara's fingers tightened around his, her touch surprisingly gentle despite her immense strength. The other Klingons watched in fascination, their previous aggression forgotten as they observed this alien interaction. Footsteps echoed down the corridor as Commander Xanth arrived, her face a mask of shock as she took in the scene before her. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Russell released Kalara's hand and turned to face the Klingon commander. "Commander Xanth, we've discovered something important. The human approach to mating, our courtship rituals, they might be the key to stabilizing your crew's condition." Xanth's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "I need to speak with you privately," Russell said, his gaze steady. "What I have to share could change everything." Xanth hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Very well. My ready room now." As they walked, Russell could feel the eyes of both humans and Klingons following them. The fate of two species hung in the balance of this conversation. Inside Xanth's ready room, Russell wasted no time. He explained the concept of human romance, emphasizing the importance of emotional connection in human mating practices. Xanth listened with growing interest, her initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. "You're saying these gentle interactions can satisfy the mating drive?" Xanth asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Russell nodded. "Not just satisfy it, but potentially stabilize your crew's condition. The emotional stimulation seems to have a powerful effect on your physiology." Xanth paced the room, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally, she turned to face Russell. "Show me," she commanded. Over the next few hours, Russell and his team transformed the Klingon warship into a crash course in human dating and courtship. They set up stations throughout the ship, each focusing on a different aspect of human romance. In the mess hall, Dr. Chen demonstrated the art of romantic dining, teaching Klingon warriors how to pour wine and engage in light conversation. The sight of fierce Klingon females delicately holding champagne flutes and attempting small talk was both amusing and oddly touching. Down in the cargo bay, Technician Cooper had set up a makeshift dance floor. He guided pairs of Klingons through the steps of a simple waltz, their movements initially awkward but growing more fluid with each pass. Even the ship's bridge had been repurposed. Dr. Ramirez stood at the helm, reading snippets of Earth's most famous love poems. The Klingons listened with rapt attention, their faces a mix of confusion and growing appreciation for this alien form of expression. Throughout it all, Dr. Foster monitored the Klingons' vital signs, her eyes widening as she observed the results. "It's working," she whispered to Russell as they watched a group of Klingons attempt to slow dance. "Their hormone levels are stabilizing. It's not a permanent solution, but it's buying us time." Russell nodded, relief washing over him. But as he surveyed the scene, he noticed something concerning. Some of his male team members were showing signs of distress: flushed skin, rapid breathing, dilated pupils. Dr. Foster followed his gaze and frowned. "The prolonged exposure to Klingon pheromones," she murmured. "It's affecting our team more than we anticipated." Russell's mind raced, weighing the risks and possibilities. An idea began to form. Bold, potentially dangerous, but possibly the key to solving both species' problems. He turned to Dr. Foster. "I need to speak with Xanth again. I think I know how we can turn this situation to everyone's advantage." As Russell made his way to Xanth's ready room, he could feel the weight of two civilizations resting on his shoulders. The next few minutes would determine not just the fate of the Klingon species, but the future of human-Klingon relations. With a deep breath, he signaled his presence and prepared to present his most daring plan yet. Russell took a deep breath as he entered Xanth's ready room. The Klingon commander stood with her back to him, gazing out at the stars. "Commander," Russell began, "I have a proposal that could solve both our problems." Xanth turned, her eyes narrowing. "Speak." Russell outlined his plan for a human-Klingon dating experiment. As he explained the potential benefits, Xanth's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. "You believe this human courtship could stabilize our condition?" she asked. "It's worth trying," Russell replied. "We've already seen positive results from our initial interactions." Xanth considered for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Very well, we will proceed with your experiment." Within hours, the human-Klingon dating experiment was underway. Russell oversaw the proceedings, matching willing human male volunteers with Klingon females. Dr. James Carter, a geneticist with a gentle demeanor, was paired with Lieutenant Kalara. Lieutenant Mark Stevens, a security officer with a more robust personality, was matched with Officer Mara. The mess hall had been transformed into a makeshift restaurant. Carter and Kalara sat across from each other, the table between them set with Earth delicacies and Klingon cuisine. "So, do you have any hobbies?" Carter asked, his voice slightly trembling. Kalara's brow furrowed. "Hobbies? I train, I fight, I serve the Empire." Carter nodded, searching for common ground. "That's admirable. I find my work in genetics equally fulfilling. There's a certain thrill in unraveling the mysteries of DNA." To everyone's surprise, Kalara leaned forward, her eyes sparking with interest. "Tell me more about this DNA." As Carter explained the intricacies of genetic science, Kalara listened intently, her usual aggressive demeanor softened, replaced by genuine curiosity. Across the room, Dr. Foster monitored their vitals. "Fascinating," she murmured to Russell. "Kalara's hormone levels are stabilizing. And look at Carter's pheromone output. It's having a calming effect on her." Russell nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Let's see how the others are faring." In the ship's arboretum, Lieutenant Stevens and Officer Mara walked among the exotic plants. Stevens attempted small talk, but Mara's responses were terse and agitated. "You know, on Earth, we often give flowers as a sign of affection," Stevens said, plucking a vibrant bloom. Mara snarled, knocking the flower from his hand. "Klingons have no use for such weak gestures." Before Stevens could react, Mara lunged at him, her teeth bared. Years of security training kicked in, and Stevens managed to subdue her without causing harm. As he held her immobilized, Mara's eyes widened with a mix of shock and grudging respect. Dr. Foster rushed over, administering a mild sedative to Mara. "This highlights the potential risks," she told Russell. "We'll need to proceed with caution." As the experiment continued, an unexpected request came from Commander Xanth. She approached Russell, her posture unusually hesitant. I wish to experience this human courtship firsthand, she said. With you. Russell blinked in surprise but quickly regained his composure. Of course, Commander. Shall we? They retreated to a private observation deck. Russell took Xanth's hand gently, explaining the human custom of holding hands. The Klingon commander's breath hitched at the unfamiliar, intimate contact. In human culture, we believe in building emotional connections, Russell explained softly. We value trust, respect, and mutual understanding. As they talked, Russell noticed Xanth's demeanor changing. The hard edges of her expression softened, her eyes reflecting a new vulnerability. This is not unpleasant, Xanth admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Meanwhile, Dr. Foster's ongoing analysis revealed a startling discovery. She burst into the observation deck, her eyes wide with excitement. Russell, Xanth, you need to see this, she said, holding up a datapad. The prolonged exposure to human pheromones and courtship behaviors is causing subtle changes in Klingon physiology. The female's hormonal cycles are beginning to synchronize with human biological rhythms. Xanth's eyes narrowed. What does this mean? It means we may have found a long-term solution to your breeding crisis, Foster explained. But it also means your biology is adapting to human influence. The implications hung heavy in the air. Xanth's expression hardened as she processed the information. This could save our species, she said slowly. But at what cost to our identity, our culture? Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the ship. Russell rushed to the bridge, Xanth close behind. Report, Xanth barked. The tactical officer, a young Klingon female, looked up with fear in her eyes. Commander, long-range sensors have detected an approaching fleet. Romulan warbirds, at least a dozen. Russell's blood ran cold. The Romulans, opportunistic and ruthless, must have intercepted their communications and realized the Klingons' vulnerable state. He turned to Xanth, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. They both knew that in their current condition, divided and weakened, they stood little chance against a Romulan attack. We need to unite our crews, Russell said urgently. It's our only hope of survival. Xanth nodded grimly. Agreed. But how do we overcome the division among my people? Russell's mind raced, formulating a plan. We accelerate the pairings, focus on the most promising matches, and we integrate our tactical knowledge, create a hybrid defense strategy. As they began to mobilize, Russell couldn't help but feel the weight of two civilizations on his shoulders. The approaching Romulan fleet loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, a stark reminder of the larger galactic implications of their unprecedented alliance. With commitment in his eyes, Russell turned to address the combined human and Klingon crew. The next few hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of interspecies relations in the galaxy. Galaxy. The crew members, both human and Klingon, stood at attention, their faces a mix of purpose and apprehension. We face a formidable enemy, Russell began, his voice steady and clear. But we have something they don't expect. Unity. He outlined the hybrid defense strategy, explaining how they would combine human tactical ingenuity with Klingon battle prowess. As he spoke, he could see the skepticism in some Klingon eyes give way to grudging respect. Commander Xanth stepped forward, her presence commanding instant attention. The humans have shown us a new way, she declared. Their methods, while different from our own, have merit. We will adapt, and we will conquer. A cheer rose from the Klingon crew, the familiar battle cry tinged with a new undertone of curiosity and acceptance. As the Romulan fleet drew closer, Russell ordered the acceleration of human-Klingon pairings. Dr. Foster worked tirelessly, monitoring the most promising matches and their effects on Klingon biology and combat readiness. In the midst of the preparations, Commander Xanth approached Russell, her eyes gleaming with an idea. Captain, she said, using the human title with a hint of respect, I propose a formal joining ceremony between select human-Klingon pairs. It will solidify our alliance and boost morale. Russell considered the proposal, recognizing its potential diplomatic and strategic benefits. Agreed, he nodded. Let's make it happen. The main hall of the Klingon ship was hastily transformed for the ceremony. Klingon battle banners hung alongside hastily replicated Earth flags, creating a striking visual representation of their newfound alliance. Dr. James Carter and Lieutenant Kalara stood at the center of the hall, the first to participate in this unprecedented union. Carter's hands trembled slightly as he faced the fierce Klingon warrior, but his eyes were filled with drive and a hint of something deeper. Russell and Xanth presided over the ceremony, their words weaving together human and Klingon traditions. As they spoke of honor, loyalty, and shared purpose, the atmosphere in the hall changed. The tension that had permeated the ship began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of shared destiny. As Carter and Kalara clasped hands, sealing their union, Dr. Foster's eyes widened in shock. She rushed to Russell, her voice low but urgent. The joining ritual, it's accelerating the hormonal synchronization between humans and Klingons. The female's conditions are stabilizing much faster than we anticipated. The news spread quickly, energizing the crew. More human Klingon pairs stepped forward, eager to participate in the ritual and contribute to their shared cause. Even Officer Mara, who had been one of the most vocal skeptics, approached Lieutenant Stevens with a grudging nod of acceptance. As the final pairs completed the ritual, alarms blared throughout the ship. The Romulan fleet had entered weapons range. Russell and Xanth exchanged a look of understanding before moving swiftly to the bridge, their movements in perfect sync. The bridge hummed with activity as human and Klingon crew members worked side by side. Russell took his position next to Xanth, their complementary leadership styles creating a palpable sense of confidence among the crew. "Tactical analysis," Xanth barked. A young human ensign responded immediately, her voice steady. 12 Romulan warbirds in attack formation. Their shields are up, weapons hot. Russell leaned forward. "Execute maneuver Alpha 3. Let's show them what this alliance can do." The Klingon ship surged forward, its movements fluid and unpredictable. The first volley caught the Romulans completely off guard, their formations scattering under the unexpected assault. At the weapons console, Stevens and Mara worked in perfect harmony. Stevens's analytical approach combined with Mara's aggressive instincts, resulting in a devastating series of attacks that left 2 Romulan ships crippled in the opening minutes of the battle. As the fight intensified, the Romulan commander attempted to sow discord. A transmission cut through the ship's communications. "Klingons, you dishonor yourselves by allying with these humans. Your culture is being corrupted, your strength diluted." The psychological attack had an immediate effect. Several Klingon crew members hesitated, their movements becoming uncertain. The ship's defensive formation wavered, leaving them vulnerable to a concentrated Romulan assault. Russell's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on Dr. Foster, and an idea sparked. "Doctor, can you modify our communication array to broadcast the stabilizing pheromones?" Foster's eyes widened in understanding. "It's possible, but I'll need a few minutes." "Do it," Russell ordered, turning back to the view screen. "Evasive pattern delta, full power to shields." The ship rocked under the Romulan assault as Foster worked feverishly at her console. Just as a particularly vicious hit threatened to overwhelm their defenses, she shouted, "Ready!" "Broadcast now," Russell commanded. A wave of invisible particles flooded the space around them. The effect on the Klingon crew was immediate. Their focus sharpened, their movements became more precise. But the impact on the nearby Romulan ships was even more dramatic. Confusion spread through their ranks, their coordinated attacks dissolving into chaos. Xanth turned to Russell, a fierce grin on her face. "Now is the time to strike. We must take their flagship." Russell nodded, his heart racing with the thrill of battle and the weight of the decision. "Agreed. Prepare a boarding party. I'll lead it myself." As they assembled near the transporter room, Russell surveyed the mixed team of humans and Klingons. Each carried an assortment of weapons, traditional Klingon blades alongside modified human phasers equipped with pheromone dispensers. "Remember," Russell addressed the team, "we fight as one. Our strength is in our unity." With a nod to the transporter chief, the boarding party dematerialized, rematerializing moments later in the heart of the Romulan flagship. The corridors were bathed in red alert lighting, the air thick with the acrid smell of overloaded circuits. The team moved swiftly, encountering fierce resistance at every turn. In the close quarters of the Romulan ship, the human-Klingon synergy truly shone. Humans provided covering fire while Klingons engaged in close combat, their movements fluid and coordinated as if they had trained together for years. Russell and Xanth led from the front, their actions mirroring each other with uncanny precision. As they neared the bridge, a particularly heavy guard force blocked their path. Russell activated his pheromone dispenser, filling the air with a concentrated dose. The effect was immediate. The Romulan defenders stumbled, their coordination faltering. Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, the boarding party surged forward. They were almost to the bridge when an imposing figure stepped out to confront them, the Romulan commander himself. Unlike his troops, the commander seemed unaffected by the pheromones. His eyes blazed with fury as he raised his weapon, targeting Russell and Xanth. "Your aberrant alliance ends here," he snarled, firing a devastating energy blast that forced Russell and Xanth to dive for cover. As the rest of the boarding party engaged the remaining Romulan defenders, Russell and Xanth found themselves isolated, facing off against the Romulan commander in a deadly three-way duel. The fate of the battle, and perhaps the future of human-Klingon relations, now rested on the outcome of this confrontation. Russell exchanged a quick glance with Xanth, a silent plan forming between them. As the Romulan commander advanced, they prepared to make their stand, the sounds of battle raging around them. Russell and Xanth crouched behind a fallen bulkhead, their eyes locked on the Romulan commander advancing towards them. The air crackled with tension as the three circled each other, weapons at the ready. Suddenly, Russell felt a surge of heat coursing through his body. His enhanced pheromones, coupled with the intensity of combat, triggered an unexpected reaction. A potent cocktail of chemicals flooded the air around them. The effect on Xanth and the Romulan commander was immediate and startling. Their aggressive stances faltered, replaced by looks of confusion and something else. Russell watched as their eyes dilated, their breathing quickened. Seizing the moment, Russell made a bold move. He lowered his weapon and stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Wait," he said, his voice calm and steady. "There's another way." The Romulan commander blinked, her grip on her disruptor loosening. "What trickery is this?" she demanded, but her voice lacked its earlier venom. Russell moved closer, maintaining eye contact with both alien leaders. He placed a gentle hand on Xanth's shoulder, then on the Romulan commander's. The touch sent a visible shiver through both of them. "My name is Russell," he said, offering a warm smile. "And you are?" The Romulan commander hesitated, then responded, "Solara, I am Commander Solara." Russell nodded, his smile widening. "Solara, Xanth, we've been fighting, but have we really tried to understand each other?" Xanth growled, but it sounded half-hearted. "Understanding is for the weak. Klingons take what they want." "And look where that's gotten us," Russell countered gently, "on the brink of destruction. But there's strength in peace, in mutual understanding." As he spoke, Russell's communicator chirped. Dr. Foster's excited voice came through. "Captain, you won't believe this. The combination of your pheromones and the combat stress is creating a temporary biochemical bond between all three species. The Romulans' aggression levels are dropping rapidly." Russell's mind raced with the implications. He turned to Solara, his eyes intense. "Commander, I propose something unprecedented, a cultural exchange program between Earth, the Klingon Empire, and the Romulan Star Empire. We focus on understanding each other's customs, particularly our mating practices. It could be the key to lasting peace." Solara's eyes widened. She lowered her weapon completely, her posture relaxing. "A bold proposal, Captain Russell, and an intriguing one." Xanth stepped forward, her earlier aggression replaced by curiosity. "The humans' methods have proven effective for our people. Perhaps there is merit in this idea." Solara nodded slowly. "I will order my fleet to stand down. As a gesture of good faith, I am willing to participate in a demonstration of these human customs you speak of." Russell's heart soared. "Excellent. Let's return to the Klingon ship. I have just the thing in mind." Hours later, the main hall of the Klingon vessel had been transformed. An elegant table stood at its center, set with fine china and gleaming silverware. Russell, Xanth, and Solara sat around it, the air thick with a mix of tension and curiosity. Russell stood, raising a glass. "To new beginnings," he toasted. As he sat, he smoothly pulled out Solara's chair for her. The Romulan commander started at the gesture, then slowly lowered herself into the seat, her eyes never leaving Russell. As the meal progressed, Russell guided his alien companions through the intricacies of human dining etiquette. He demonstrated the art of small talk, the gentle clinking of glasses in a toast, and even the intimate act of feeding another small bites of food. Xanth watched in fascination as Russell offered Solara a forkful of replicated caviar. The Romulan commander hesitated, then leaned forward, accepting the morsel. Her eyes widened at the taste, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "This is not unpleasant," Solara admitted, her usual stoic demeanor cracking. Xanth, not to be outdone, grabbed a spoon and clumsily attempted to feed Russell a bite of Klingon gog. The wriggling worms slipped off the spoon, landing with a splat on Russell's uniform. The three leaders stared at the mess for a moment before bursting into laughter. As they ate and talked, the atmosphere on the ship began to shift. The dinner was being broadcast to both Klingon and Romulan crews, serving as an impromptu cultural education session. Curious crew members gathered around view screens, watching their leaders engage in these strange but oddly compelling human rituals. In the ship's mess hall, Lieutenant Stevens and Officer Mara had taken charge, organizing an impromptu dance lesson. Klingon warriors awkwardly attempted to master the box step, while Romulan engineers puzzled over the concept of leading in a waltz. "No, no," Stevens laughed, guiding a burly Klingon's hands to his partner's waist. "Gentle, remember? Like handling a delicate sensor array." The Klingon frowned in concentration, his touch softening as he guided his Romulan partner across the floor. Slowly, clumsily, couples began to move in sync, the rhythm of the music overcoming years of ingrained hostility. Back in the main hall, Dr. Foster approached Russell with a data pad, her eyes shining with excitement. "Captain, the results are remarkable. Prolonged exposure to these human courtship rituals is having a stabilizing effect on both Klingon and Romulan physiology. The implications for long-term peace are staggering." Russell nodded, a sense of hope swelling in his chest. He turned to Xanth and Solara, who were attempting to feed each other bits of chocolate mousse with limited success. "I believe it's time we discuss the next steps," Russell said, his voice filled with quiet grit. "A formal trilateral agreement between our peoples, not just for peace, but for a shared future." Xanth and Solara exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. As they began to outline the framework for this historic accord, none of them noticed the dark figure slipping out of the shadows. Sub-Commander Verak's face twisted with disgust as he watched the proceedings. He tapped his communicator, speaking in a harsh whisper. "The situation has degraded further than we feared. Implement Phase 1 of the plan. We will not allow our people to be corrupted by these human mating rituals." As Verak's conspirators began to move, the future of three civilizations hung in the balance, with the shocking power of human courtship at its center. As Verak's conspirators began to move, the future of three civilizations hung in the balance, with the shocking power of human courtship at its core. Unaware of the looming threat, Russell, Xanth, and Solara continued their preparations for the historic three-way hug. The main hall of the Klingon vessel buzzed with activity as crew members hastily arranged the space for the momentous occasion. Lieutenant Stevens, overseeing security arrangements, noticed an unusual flurry of activity on his monitors. "Sir," he called out to Russell, "I'm detecting irregular movement in the lower decks." Russell frowned, his instincts on high alert. "Investigate, but be discreet. We can't risk alarming our guests." Stevens nodded, catching Officer Mara's eye. The two moved swiftly towards the turbolift, their steps in perfect sync. As they descended to the lower decks, the air grew thick with tension. Rounding a corner, they stumbled upon a group of Romulan and Klingon conspirators huddled around an open panel, their hands deep in the ship's circuitry. "Hey!" Stevens shouted, his hand flying to his phaser. The saboteurs whirled, their faces contorted with rage. In an instant, the narrow corridor erupted into chaos. Stevens ducked as a Klingon warrior lunged at him, the whoosh of a bat-leth slicing through the air, where his head had been moments before. Mara sprang into action, her Klingon combat training evident in every move. She grappled with a Romulan, their bodies slamming against the bulkhead. Stevens marveled at her fluid grace even as he parried blows from his own attacker. Back on the main deck, oblivious to the struggle below, Russell, Xanth, and Solara gathered for the ceremonial hug. The air hummed with anticipation as they stepped towards each other. "For peace," Russell said softly, extending his arms. "For honor," Xanth growled, her eyes gleaming. "For understanding," Solara added, her voice steady. As their arms entwined, a sudden tremor shook the ship. The lights flickered, and the broadcast screens showing the event to the gathered fleets stuttered and went dark. Dr. Foster, monitoring the situation from her console, gasped. "Captain, the combined pheromones, they're interacting with the ship's systems." Russell, still locked in the embrace, called out, "Explain, Doctor." Foster's fingers flew over her console. "The pheromone levels are off the charts. They've created a feedback loop with our communication array. We're broadcasting at a strength I've never seen before." The implications hit Russell like a photon torpedo. Their message of peace, carried on a wave of interspecies pheromones, was reaching far beyond their assembled fleets. On nearby neutral planets, the effects were immediate and startling. On Arcadia the 30, longtime rivals in a trade dispute suddenly found themselves compelled to shake hands. On Beltos Prime, warring factions laid down their weapons in favor of awkward attempts at human-style hugs. Aboard the Klingon vessel, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Romulan and Klingon crew members, their usual stoic demeanors melting away, began to display uncharacteristic behaviors. A grizzled Klingon warrior tentatively offered a flower to a stunned Romulan engineer. In the mess hall, a group of mixed species attempted a clumsy waltz, their laughter echoing through the corridors. Sub-Commander Verak, watching the scene unfold from a shadowy corner, felt his carefully laid plans crumbling. With a snarl, he gestured to his remaining loyalists. "To the weapons control! We must end this madness!" But as they moved through the ship, Verak noticed his team's steps faltering. The pheromone-saturated air seemed to sap their will to fight. By the time they reached the weapons control room, half his squad was engaged in an impromptu poetry recital with a group of human ensigns. Verak raised his disruptor, aiming at the weapons console, but found his arm shaking. The urge to fire warred with a sudden, inexplicable desire to embrace the nearest crew member. With a roar of frustration, he dropped his weapon, sinking to his knees. In the lower decks, Stevens and Mara stood amid a group of subdued conspirators. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by a dazed look of contentment. "What just happened?" Stevens asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Mara shrugged, a rare smile playing on her lips. "I do not know, but I feel different, lighter." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them crackled with an energy that had nothing to do with pheromones. On the bridge, Dr. Foster approached Russell, her face a mix of excitement and concern. "Captain, the pheromone effect is temporary, but its impact could be long-lasting. We've inadvertently triggered a massive shift in interspecies relations." Russell's mind raced, seeing both the opportunity and the potential pitfalls. He turned to Xanth and Solara, still flushed from their embrace. "I have a proposal," he began, his voice steady with purpose. As Russell outlined his plan for an expanded cultural exchange program, inviting representatives from the affected neutral planets, Xanth and Solara listened with rapt attention. Their usual masks of authority had softened, replaced by expressions of genuine interest. "Yes," Solara said, her voice unusually warm. "Let us seize this moment. The stars themselves seem aligned for peace." Xanth nodded vigorously, her warriors bearing temporarily forgotten. "We shall show these new worlds the power of human mating customs." As they began drafting invitations to the neutral worlds, the ship's communication channels lit up with incoming messages. The Klingon High Council and Romulan Senate, thrown into chaos by reports of widespread behavioral changes among their citizens, demanded explanations. Russell stood on the bridge, watching as the first shuttles from neutral worlds began their approach. The once hostile Klingon vessel, now transformed into a hub of interstellar diplomacy, buzzed with activity as crew members prepared for the incoming delegates. Lieutenant Stevens and Officer Mara, their bonds strengthened by their recent combat experience, took charge of security arrangements. Their seamless cooperation served as a testament to the potential of human-Klingon partnerships. As the first shuttle docked, Russell took a deep breath. He knew that the next few hours would shape the future of multiple civilizations. The future of the stars now rested on the surprising efficacy of human courtship techniques, and he was determined to make the most of this unprecedented opportunity. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the first delegates from the neutral worlds. Their eyes wide with curiosity and a touch of apprehension, they stepped into a ship that just days ago had been poised for war, now transformed into a beacon of interspecies harmony. Russell stepped forward to greet them, a warm smile on his face. "Welcome," he said, extending his hand in the traditional human gesture of greeting. "We have much to discuss, and even more to learn from each other." As the delegates tentatively reached out to shake his hand, Russell couldn't help but marvel at the twists of fate that had led to this moment. The shocking power of human mating customs had set the stage for a new era of galactic cooperation, and he was right at the center of it all. As the first delegates from neutral worlds stepped into the transformed Klingon vessel, Russell's mind raced with the possibilities that lay ahead. The ship, once a symbol of aggression, now hummed with an energy of hope and curiosity. "Welcome aboard," Russell said, extending his hand to a tall, purple-skinned delegate from Arcadia III. The alien hesitated for a moment before mimicking the gesture, its three-fingered hand grasping Russell's firmly. Xanth and Solara, standing on either side of Russell, watched the exchange with keen interest. Solara leaned in, whispering, "Fascinating. Such a simple gesture, yet it conveys so much." As more delegates arrived, Russell, Xanth, and Solara demonstrated various human greetings. They shook hands, bowed slightly, and even attempted a few fist bumps, much to the amusement and bewilderment of their guests. "Now let me introduce you to the art of small talk," Russell said, guiding a group of wide-eyed aliens towards the main hall. "It's a human custom to discuss neutral topics like the weather or sports when first meeting someone." The delegates nodded eagerly, their translators working overtime to keep up with the flood of new information. As the meet and greet continued, Dr. Foster approached Russell, her face a mix of excitement and concern. "Captain, I have an update on the pheromone situation," she said, her voice low. "The effects are starting to diminish. We might have only a few hours left of this heightened state of receptivity." Russell nodded, his heart made. "Then we'll make the most of it. It's time to initiate Operation Intergalactic Mixer." Within minutes, the ship's intercom crackled to life, Russell's voice echoing through every deck. "Attention all crew members and honored guests. We invite you to join us in the main hall for a special event showcasing human social customs." The response was immediate. Aliens of all shapes and sizes began flooding into the main hall, their eyes wide with curiosity. The ship's crew had worked quickly, transforming the space into a lively party venue. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, and the lights had been dimmed to create a more intimate atmosphere. As the first notes of Earth music filled the air, Lieutenant Stevens and Officer Mara took center stage. "Welcome to Human Dance 101, Stevens announced, a grin spreading across his face. "We'll start with something simple, the box step." The unlikely pair demonstrated the basic move, their bodies moving in perfect sync. Around the room, aliens began to pair up, their movements clumsy but enthusiastic as they attempted to mimic the humans. A Belton diplomat with 4 legs struggled to find his rhythm, nearly toppling his Arcadian partner. "Like this?" he asked, his lower appendages tangling. Mara approached, her usual stern expression softened by an encouraging smile. "Almost. Try thinking of it as a battle maneuver, precise and controlled." In another corner of the room, Carter and Calera had set up a speed dating station. Aliens sat across from each other at small tables, engaging in rapid-fire conversations as a timer ticked down. "Tell me," a jellyfish-like being burbled to its furry companion, What do you enjoy doing in your free time? The furry alien's whiskers twitched as it considered the question. I enjoy basking in radiation storms and solving complex mathematical equations. And you? As the mixer gained momentum, Xanth and Solara found themselves swept up in the excitement. They commandeered a quiet corner, setting up an impromptu interspecies compatibility matchmaking service. Step right up, Xanth bellowed, her warrior's voice cutting through the din. Find your perfect mate across the stars. Solara, her usual Romulan reserve completely abandoned, handed out questionnaires to the eager aliens lining up. Please indicate your species' preferred environmental conditions and whether you reproduce by mitosis or meiosis, she explained, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. The sight of the Klingon and Romulan leaders working together to play matchmaker sent a ripple of joy through the crowd. Former enemies helped each other fill out forms, offering suggestions and sharing laughs over particularly unusual compatibility questions. As the event reached its zenith, Russell took to the makeshift stage. The music faded, and all eyes turned to the human captain. Friends, allies, beings from across the galaxy, Russell began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Today we stand on the brink of a new era, an era of understanding, of cooperation, and yes, of love. A cheer went up from the assembled crowd, tentacles and appendages waving in approval. It is my great honor to announce the formation of the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program, Russell continued. Through this initiative, we will continue to share and learn from each other's customs, with a special focus on the traditions that bring us closer together. As Russell spoke, aides circulated through the crowd with data pads, collecting signatures from the alien delegates. The excitement was palpable as one by one, representatives from dozens of worlds signed the agreement. Just as Russell was about to conclude his speech, a shrill alarm cut through the celebratory atmosphere. Dr. Foster burst into the room, her face flushed with urgency. Captain, she called out, pushing her way through the crowd, we have a situation. The prolonged exposure to human mating methods, it's triggered something unprecedented. Russell's eyes widened as he took in the scene around him. Throughout the room, aliens were beginning to display signs of intense attraction. A Beltan diplomat was attempting to engage in an elaborate mating dance with a potted plant, while a group of Arcadians had formed a swaying, humming circle, their pheromones creating a visible mist in the air. It's a synchronized breeding response, Dr. Foster explained hurriedly. Multiple species are entering their mating cycles simultaneously. If we don't act fast, this ship could turn into an interstellar love nest. Russell's mind raced, weighing the delicate balance between diplomacy and ship safety. With a nod of tenacity, he tapped his communicator. All hands, this is the captain. Implement emergency protocol. Love boat immediately. I repeat, emergency protocol. Love boat is now in effect. As the crew sprang into action, Russell turned to Dr. Foster. We need to stabilize this situation, Doctor. How quickly can you develop a pheromone treatment to temper these urges? Dr. Foster's fingers flew over her data pad. I'll need an hour in the lab, Captain. But what about crowd control in the meantime? Russell's gaze swept the room, taking in the chaos of alien courtship rituals unfolding around him. We'll create supervised courtship zones throughout the ship, and I think it's time for our crew to put their cultural training to the test, as romance coaches. As Russell began organizing the response to this unexpected development, the once fearsome Klingon vessel continued its transformation. What had started as a diplomatic mission was quickly becoming the galaxy's most unlikely matchmaking cruise, all thanks to the shocking power of human mating customs.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.